You're listening to Inside IASB, a podcast series dedicated to informing and encouraging Illinois School Board members. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Isaac Warren. I'm the Director of Digital Communications at the Illinois Association of School Boards. And with me today, I have Lori Grant, who is our Associate Executive Director of Outreach, Training, and Events. Well, Lori, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. I'm really excited to talk with you about new board members coming off an election cycle. It was really exciting, and it's it's a great opportunity for folks to get to understand their role as a school board member, I think, and hopefully we can help them out with some frequently asked questions.
Well, thanks for having me, Isaac. Excited, and I hope that, yes, they find this information valuable. There's over 1,000 new board members are starting their new role, so excited to welcome them and talk about their work.
Yeah, me too. So let's just dive right in. One of the first questions I think the general public has, and maybe even some school board members today might have, is what is the primary role of a school board member?
Sure. School board members, their job is to govern. They're democratically elected to govern the public school district, and they help make decisions that shape policies, educational policies, and the priorities of the community. That's why they're elected by the community. They essentially make the big picture decisions that affect how school districts are run. But they do it without getting involved in the daily operations. And that's where people are often surprised when they get to the board table, and how important it is to stay in that governing role, because they do hire and evaluate the superintendent, and it's the board's only employee, and so they really they empower that superintendent to do the work of the daily operations, and they govern and without running the day-to-day operations. So I think that's always kind of a big surprise to the community when they realize that that's not the board's job.
I agree. Yeah,
right. But they also they represent the community. They were elected by this community, and so they act as a bridge between the public and the school district to ensure that the community values are reflected. We have this beautiful thing in Illinois and most states, this local control, and each community is unique, and each community has their unique needs depending on where they are, and so it's the board's job to bridge between the community and the public school to make sure that those values are reflected.
Absolutely, yeah.
They also, they set policy, hugely important piece of their role, creating district policies to guide the operations of schools. They are budget oversight. They monitor, the curriculum, the standards. They approve curriculum and ensure it aligns with community standards and state standards, of course. And a really important piece of a school board member is to be an advocate for public education. Obviously, their reason for running and for this giant act of service that they've committed to is because they believe in public schools, they believe in children, and supporting legislation and initiatives that benefit public education. That's a big part of their role as well.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. That's a great oversight of what the board's role is. And I'm really glad you touched on the superintendent position, because you're right, it is the only employee of the school board. It's kind of an interesting relationship there. And I was wondering, could you kind of dive a bit more into that? What is the relationship between the school board and the superintendent?
Oh, absolutely. This is a big piece of training that we go out when we work with school boards, and we talk about the team of 8. There are 7 school board members, with exception of one district, Chicago Public Schools, which now is 21 school board members. But we always talk about that team of 8, the collaboration of the board and the superintendent, and that relationship is absolutely crucial, because the superintendent is the CEO. And I know that many board members work in the corporate world, and so they understand that idea of a CEO. And I've often said that if a school district were a corporation, they just would be a giant organization. Because if you think about it, even our smallest school districts, 300 students, there's still a building that superintendent is responsible for, ensuring the building maintenance, the operation, the budget, The HVAC, safety, huge job of being a superintendent, ensuring, that our children are safe. Curriculum and instruction, of course, transportation. The superintendent's job is just hugely important. And so that board relationship is crucial, to establish communication expectations, making sure the board is giving the superintendent all the support needed. It can be a very lonely job. I know through COVID, there were some studies out there about one of the most challenging roles in the country during that COVID time. And it was a superintendent of schools because of the decisions they're making and trying to make sure everyone is taken care of. So that board of 7, they always say, the board is the boss, but it's not 7 bosses. It's one collective voice. It's the voice of the board, and that is so important to speak with one voice to the superintendent and work with the superintendent to determine their goals, making sure the superintendent is clear on the expectations, because they also evaluate the superintendent. So they are they're a support for the superintendent in that lonely role sometimes, but they evaluate year after year. They're responsible to ensure that goals are being met. And so that relationship is just absolutely crucial. So we call it a team of 8. It's not a board of 7 plus a superintendent. It really does need to be a team to work together.
I agree. Yeah, I like that. The team of 8, I think, is a really good mantra to keep in mind during these board meetings. And it's, I don't know what's wrong with that. Yeah. So with all this responsibility that school boards have, I'm sure they get paid. It's a lot of money that they get, right?
Oh, are you ready for this? You better sit down. Absolutely nothing. Yeah, our boards, our members, they're volunteers. And that people are always surprised by that. There are some states that pay board members, but not in Illinois, and most states that is not the case. Our board members are volunteers. Wow, what an act of service, right? And there's nearly 6,000 of them here in Illinois. Several years ago, I was speaking to some middle school kids. They were asking questions. These were 13 and 14-year-olds, and asking questions about school board members. And they had a list of questions, and they said, "Well, how long do they serve?" I said, "Well, commonly it's 4 years. It's a 4-year commitment. Sometimes it's a little different, but usually it's about 4 years." And they said, "Well, how much do they get paid?" And when I shared, it's absolutely nothing. They're volunteers. And then one wonderful student, the next question was, "Why would they do that?" And I looked at them, I said, "Right? You need to thank them, people. You need to thank them. I mean, this is an act of service to show up for you kiddos every day and make that kind of commitment. It's extraordinary, truly. And they do deserve our thanks. So, yeah, they don't get paid a penny."
Yes, thank a member. I mean, November 15th is National School Board Day, I believe. There's a thank a member. I forget what the actual name of that holiday is.
I believe it is. I think you're right, Isaac.
Okay.
I can tell you, though, that many board members, they will say their pay is in the rewards they get from making these great decisions and helping their district grow. And, servant leaders, as they are, they say that's their salary, is watching the kids graduate on graduation day and receiving that diploma. That's the ultimate pay for them. I've heard that a lot from board members.
Sure. Seeing the next generation of leaders graduating and working through the system that you're a part of and helping build up. I mean, I think that's an incredibly rewarding feat in and of itself each and every year. So that's a really good point.
Yep, you got it.
So with all this responsibility and for free, because again, they're not paid, how do you think, if you were in the shoes of a new board member or looking at a new board member, let's say, how would you encourage that new board member to balance the needs of students and teachers and their community that has elected them?
Yeah, that's one of the greatest challenges board members face. School districts are very complex. There's a lot to manage, and they are elected by a community to govern this district. So they have this giant span of needs that they are monitoring and addressing. But ultimately, it always comes down to what we want as the end result for our kids, student outcomes, right? Student outcomes, the reason public schools exist, student outcomes. But balancing all of those needs is tricky. And so board members have to do a lot of listening to understand, especially new board members, not only hearing from their community, but learning about the operations of the district, not to go run operations, but to better understand when it comes time to make decisions about those, putting their trust in the staff to do the work. They have to really lean on and rely on their expert superintendent, administrators, and educators. They're in there living, eating, breathing the work every single day, and doing a lot of listening to understand to make those sometimes very difficult decisions. It is a delicate balance that school leaders, they have to walk it every day. So it's a lot of learning and listening and doing the very best to vet the all the information to make the best decisions as a board.
Yes, very good points. And I agree that trust is such an important key factor. It's one of the bedrock principles really of our democracy.
That's right.
And just being able to trust one another that they're going to do the best they can, we'll do the best we can, is going to go a long way.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of playing off of your answer, how can a board member support both staff and students and ensure that they have the resources that they need? Getting a little bit more specific here.
Sure. Well, again, this is where the board, they must rely on their superintendent and that staff. The superintendent works with their cabinet and staff to bring to the board what they need to do the work. There's goals, there's strategic plans, there's all this work being done to meet the goals essentially for these student outcomes that we talk about. So there's a lot of things that they do as a board to make sure that those resources are being available. The big one is, of course, ensuring that the budget decisions reflect the priorities and needs of the staff and students. And that is based on the information that's brought to them from the superintendent, right? So again, you talked about that trust, just that oversight, just ensuring that the staff is bringing the information the board needs to make those decisions. So budget decisions, making sure their policies, reviewing their policies, making sure that they support equitable education, safe environments, staff well-being, monitoring to ensure those policies are followed. That's a really big, important part of the board's work, to look at those policies and do they apply to their district, and are they being followed, and are they making a positive impact? Encouraging data-driven decisions. Data-driven is just crucial to identify and address achievement gaps, to address policy needs, really everything about the school district's operations and students. So being data-driven is really essential. Supporting ongoing training for educators and staff. We all know that this world, we're moving at a really swift pace and trying to keep up. It's really something. Yeah. So making sure staff and including your superintendent can stay current with best practices, new technologies, all the evolving student needs, social emotional needs are just huge right now for our kids. And so there's a lot of things that board members can do, but it really is based on the information they receive from their superintendent and staff, and making sure that they're clear on the priorities of the district, the plan, the strategic plan of the district, and are their budget needs reflecting those priorities?
Yeah, making these data-driven decisions is very critical, making sure you not only know how to receive this data, but also understand how to interpret it and apply it to changes in policies or things like that would help benefit your district the most. And the good news is IASB offers plenty of workshops specifically for that task to make these data-driven decisions. So yeah, we have great resources to help the board make these decisions.
Agree. And you know what we actually do, and not a commercial here, but it is a commercial. We do have a brand new workshop. It's helping the board make creating goals using data, monitoring those goals, monitoring goals using data. So, and it's a great workshop too. So that's an opportunity for a board. This is a place that they would like to grow and better understand how to look at that data and the right questions to ask. That's the most important thing is what questions do you ask to monitor that are appropriate for a board without getting into the day-to-day operations. So, we have a great workshop for that. Thank you.
Agreed. Yeah. Highly encourage any listener to take a look at those workshop offerings and see if your district would be interested in taking those. Let's talk about the first couple, let's say the first 100 days of serving as a school board member. There's a lot that happens. And one of those is taking all that state mandated training that I'm sure they've heard a lot about.
Oh, yeah.
Once you come out the other end of that, I'm sure it's kind of like, what was that? What did I listen to? Because there's a lot of information that you have to go through to get to comply with the state mandated training. What do you think that learning curve is like for new board members, not just for the state mandated training, but also just sitting in on the first board meeting?
Oh, sure. It is funny. We hear the word mandate and state mandated training and automatically it's like, oh, okay, let's just check the boxes. Let's get through this. Yeah. But really, I encourage new board members to take the mindset of, hey, let's learn. Because I will tell you, the training, our online training, we just updated all of it for 2025. Our incredible expert attorneys, several attorneys from across the state for the Open Meetings Act, the PDLT, the PARA, all of that mandated training, including our new student outcomes training. That's a newly mandated legislative mandate that our new board members must take. But it is excellent. It is just excellent knowledge to have. Yeah, it's about 4 hours when all is said and done. But in that 4 hours, the amount of learning you do that you can bring back and immediately use with your board and have an understanding of the work that the staff is doing day to day, it's great stuff. And there's also basics of governance. What is the role? How do we approach that meeting? And so I encourage new board members, when you jump into that training, to jump into it with a growth mindset of learning and not just to check the box. Really listen to those videos. There's some wonderful scenarios that real life scenarios that are brought forth in these videos that all board members can learn from, and they very well may have to handle in their own district one day. So encourage that. But when it comes to that first board meeting and being prepared for that first meeting, I encourage, if your district board hasn't already assigned a mentor, a veteran board member mentor for you, reach out and start building that relationship and start asking questions. Because that first meeting, even something as basic as, okay, when it comes time for the vote, and we go around and you call our names, do I say aye? Do I say yes? Do I say I agree? Little tiny things. What are the traditions at your board table? Those little things are really good to know before going into that first meeting. Because frankly, as soon as that board member takes the oath of office, they have their vote has the same equal authority as every other vote at the table. So the moment that oath of office happens, they are a board member. And that first meeting included, they start voting and making decisions for that district. So good if prior to that first meeting, they could sit down and have a coffee with one of the board members or the superintendent as well. And often this happens, the board president and superintendent will do some orientation. They should do orientation. It may be prior to the first meeting. It may not be, depending on the timing of the reorganization meeing. But really encourage new board members to reach out to a veteran board member if they haven't reached out to you, and ask those kinds of questions that may seem silly, like, how do I respond when I vote? Is it aye or is it yes? And understanding how to access the board packet, reading that packet in advance, going into that meeting with as much information as you possibly can. And don't be afraid to ask questions about that board packet in advance. And in fact, that's one of those expectations we encourage as far as board agreements and board protocols, that a board member walks into that meeting having read that board packet prior to the meeting. So there aren't any surprises, and that those questions can be asked in advance. So that's my biggest thing. I would encourage them to make sure that they've spoken with a veteran board member and superintendent, and what those expectations are before that first meeting.
I totally agree. There's so much knowledge to be had and gained from veteran board members who have been in the same shoes as a new board member and probably had the same questions. And they're not, and it's to the board's advantage to share that information. And so everyone can get on the same page as soon as possible, just to help move things forward and help the board function as efficiently as possible. What do you think is the biggest challenge faced by school board members today? Let's take a broad look at that.
Oh, wow. I would love to hear from some board members on this one. But I can tell you just what I've heard from board members and superintendents. It's the hardest part is just keeping their eye on the prize, it's student outcomes, and trying to meet the needs in this society that is changing so quickly, and just keeping up, kind of this. I feel like it's shock and awe, this constant barrage of legislative changes, both at the federal level, at the state level, and AI. Wow, what a huge advancement that is, and what a wonderful tool that is. But trying to keep up with our school policy, what kind of policies are we going to have around this? How are we using this in our district? I think that's the biggest challenge, is just keeping up with the just incredible pace that our society is at right now. But also, boards are nonpartisan. They're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And we all know, I'll just, let's be real, more and more, there are attempts for partisan politics to eke their way into board work. And that's when things get really challenging and difficult. So that, the political ramifications, I think that boards maybe even 5 years, 10 years ago weren't dealing with, they are dealing with things like that now, which makes it even more challenging to make those difficult decisions. So, but I would love to hear from a board member too, what they believe.
I would too. Yeah. And I look forward to a future episode where we might have a new board member or a veteran board member. I should say.
I think that's wonderful. That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. What sort of, so we, as a new member, I'm sure there's a lot of opportunities for professional development for just being a school board member. I mean, what options or opportunities do they have that IASB could offer?
Oh, absolutely. We have, that's my job. It's so important. It's, we're all about continued learning and growth. And, what I just talked about, the fast pace that society is moving, it's been keeping up. So it's just staying relevant and knowing what's coming next. So, of course, our online learning, we've got all the mandated training, but we also have additional training that isn't mandated, for if taking a deeper dive into the Open Meetings Act. There's training for, there's just a whole assortment of things on our online learning, but also we do webinars, usually once a month, sometimes more frequently, depending on the time of year. And those webinars are easy, usually during the lunch hour, that you can just jump in and listen in on different content and different topics. Right now, we have a webinar series on school finance, which is also complex. We just did one on revenue, one on expenditures. We're about to do one on the tax levy. So the good thing, all those webinars are recorded and you can watch those recordings at any time. That is a wonderful library for you as a new board member to go in and start learning. You can, click on it on your phone and listen to it in your car as you're driving, or your commute. So those are two great opportunities. But we also have the joint annual conference, which is our yearly annual conference. Is it the 92nd or 93rd, Isaac? I think it's the 92nd.
Let me check real quick on the conference.
Yeah, I think it's the 92nd conference in Chicago. just a giant opportunity to connect with other board members, administrators, over 100 panels based on school governance and all the things that are related to education and current relevant things that are happening in education right now. Incredible general sessions with general session keynote speakers that inspire and make you think. Please attend the conference. It is just an incredible learning opportunity, especially for new board members, but for really everyone to just connect as well. And then we also, for new board members, we have something new in September this year called Super Saturday, and it is in 3 locations throughout the state. We tried to spread it out so everyone in the state could hopefully not have to drive too far. We have one up in Naperville, one in Peoria, and one in Collinsville, and they're all on the same day. Excuse me, Isaac. And it is a day now that, board members, you will have had a good 3, 4, almost 5 months maybe under your belt. And no doubt we'll have a whole bunch of questions that you can bring. It's an in-person event that will help you connect with other new board members, do deeper dives into things like Open Meetings Act, your governance role, learn more about policy, learn about government relations and how you can be an advocate for public education legislatively. So we're so excited about this day. It's brand new. It's going to be just jam-packed with engaging activities and opportunities to learn about each other and learn about the role of the board. So that's another learning opportunity, and that's September 13th.
Yeah, so plenty of in-person networking events that are really, you have to be there to understand why they're so critical and so powerful and impactful, especially conference. Conference is one of those things that you hear about it, but once you go there, wow, it is very different being in person than just kind of hearing about it.
My first time I attended conference when I first started at IASB, I walked in and it's in the Hyatt Regency and the Sheraton, and we basically take over 3 hotels, but then there's about 10 or 12 hotels in the block that people can stay at. And it's such a great time in the city too, because it's the weekend before Thanksgiving. There's the big Disney lights parade on Saturday night. So it almost turns into a family affair. It's just a fun, the tree lighting happens in Chicago that Friday night of that weekend. So it's just an awesome weekend to be in the city too, barring any snow or ice storms. And yeah, it's a wonderful experience. We hope everybody attends.
I do too. Yeah. It's amazing every single year. We kind of touched on some workshops that were available through IASB, and it kind of helps answer this next question, which is how can boards measure and evaluate the success of their board? How can they know they're doing, I want to say a good job, but how can they kind of grade themselves?
I love this question. Because reflection is something we just don't take enough time to do. We're all moving so fast. And to take a breath, even if just for a couple hours, to reflect, to grow and get better, it is such a valuable, worthwhile time. And boards that take the time to do this, at least yearly, are high functioning. I can give you examples upon examples of boards that are high functioning. Their districts are doing so well that even though their boards are working and they're doing great things, they still do a self-evaluation every single year, because that's how much they value the time together to reflect and to assess how they're doing as a board. So we have these principles of effective governance that board members will be hearing a lot about in the coming weeks and months as they do their training. But when we look at really high functioning boards, we look at these principles of effective governance, which we basically call, it's a board member's job description. And there's 6 of them. One is, clarifying the district purpose. So setting the direction, determining who gets what, and for how much. So when boards think about these 6 principles and reflect on them, are we doing that? How are we doing that? The second one is connecting with the community. Are we finding opportunities to hear from our community? Is it a two-way engagement? It's not just, PR. It's not just information going out. It's what are we hearing back from our community? And are we speaking for the community as a whole and not just individual interests? That gets tricky for board members too. The third principle is the board hires the superintendent. The board evaluates that superintendent. So that's one of the most crucial, important decisions a board will make is hiring that superintendent, that CEO of the district. So taking the time to reflect on that, are we supporting our superintendent? Are we clear on our expectations? Do we have a good evaluation process for our superintendent? That fourth principle is, are we delegating authority to that superintendent and staff to do that work of the day-to-day operations? And we talk about that, staying out of the stay in your lane discussion, which maybe sounds a little harsh, but it's really true. We have the role of the board, which is the governing body, but then we have that superintendent's role, which is in charge of operations. And are we as a board, are we crossing the line and making that really difficult for the board to complete that because we are maybe doing the work that we shouldn't be doing? They monitor performance. That's that fifth principle, monitoring not just adherence to policies, but also making those data-driven decisions. Are we monitoring and are we clear in how we're going to monitor performance of our district? And then that sixth one is taking responsibility for itself. And I always say to boards, that sixth principle is you taking this time to reflect. So we have tools. We have a board governance review, which is a workshop we do where it's a survey that goes to the board and the superintendent, and it asks these questions. How are you doing in these principles? And the board, there's a rubric that, you know what, we're meeting it. We're killing it here. Boy, this is a place we need work. This is a place where we need to fix some things, and we need to fix it right now. So that is a great opportunity for a board with their outreach and training director to sit down, take 2 hours, 3 hours, a half day, whatever it is, to sit and reflect on their work. And boards do that year after year. We call it a self-evaluation. It can be done in a closed session. We have the exception when we're talking about board ethics, board work, how you're doing your board meetings and functions day to day. So they're reflecting on those principles of effective governance, taking the time to do that through a self-evaluation. There's also many boards. We have a form that boards can use. We have a couple different examples of formative assessments they can do after every board meeting. Did we ask our questions in advance? Were we respectful to each other? Did we allow time for others to share their voice? Was there one person that dominated the meeting the entire time? So there are many ways that boards can reflect on it, but they have to commit the time to do it. But this process of a self-evaluation, it can also happen all year long through meetings. It doesn't have to be a workshop, although we do encourage that, especially at the beginning of a new board entering the picture, or anytime a new superintendent enters the picture. It just creates a whole new board, a whole new dynamic. Being clear on communication expectations, being clear on board agreements, how we're going to go do our work, how are we going to go to that meeting, what are the processes and procedures that we as a board need to follow. So that was a long answer to the question, but this is really important because a board is together for 4 years. And many times, in re-elections, these board members, they need to build relationships and get to know each other because they're going to be spending a lot of time together. And
sure. And
boards that build those relationships and they have a clear understanding of their role and how they're going to do their work, they are so successful. And the districts, it shows. I'll tell you what, it really does.
I agree. Yes. And I think it's important to note when we talk about an efficient board, it's not just measuring the outcome of the board. It's measuring the outcome plus how did they get there? Were they communicative? Did they talk with each other? Did they, like you said, did only one member kind of dominate the discussion?
Right.
It's the board synergy is just as important as how you get the outcome, because a functioning board functions as best as its members. And you can have a board that has great outcomes, but if they're like fighting in the background or something, it's not going to bode well for long-term use in the community.
Well, it's, being respectful to one another and being a role model for the community and for the kids, showing what good governance looks like. It's such an exceptional piece of service that our board members, like we said, they're volunteers and they got on the board for a reason. There's a reason that they felt there's a voice that they could share. There's experiences that they believe they could have an impact. And that voice is so important to share. But it's a matter of how you're going to do it. And the entire board, the team of 8, being clear what those expectations are.
Yeah, well put. Lori, my final question for you is, for all the new board members listening, what advice would you give them as they're about to begin their volunteer service for their school board?
Listen, and learn. Use every resource available to build your capacity, to build your understanding of the district that you are serving, listening to the community that you've committed to serve. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And no, you hear this all the time. No question is too small, or there's no dumb questions. And there really aren't, because school districts are so complex. So ask questions. It's not just about the district and the operations. It's about the board work and the board processes, especially in those first 100 days, figuring out those board processes and what you need to do to prepare for the meetings, what you need to do to understand if finance is not your cup of tea, focus in on those webinars we've just recorded about finance. And most importantly, work on building relationships with your fellow board members. Have coffee with them one at a time. Get to know them. Like I said before, you're going to be spending a lot of time together. Build that relationship. It is so much easier to disagree with someone if you're friends and if you know where they're coming from, because you know what? Board votes aren't always 7-0. It's not always unanimous, and it shouldn't be unanimous. So you're going to disagree. And it is easier to disagree with people you've begun to understand and to know, and you've built a relationship with. But then also share your voice and contribute. Don't be afraid to share your voice. You were elected for a reason. You ran for a reason. Contribute to the board discussion. Don't be afraid, even as a brand new board member, to do that. That's why you're there. There's a reason you chose to run for the board. So that's my advice.
Perfect. Well, I don't think I could have said any better myself, Lori. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking over these questions. I'm sure a lot of new board members have, and maybe even some veterans maybe have some similar questions. So hopefully this episode was insightful and able to answer a lot of those questions that they had. So again, thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Awesome. Thank you, Isaac. And if you're a board member listening right now, thank you for your service and for answering the call, because boy, our students, they deserve the very best we can give them. So school board members are a big part of making sure that happens. So thank you to all board members if you're listening right now.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, Isaac.
Thank you for listening to the podcast, and thank you for your dedicated volunteer service to public education. If you would like to stay up to date with future episodes, please consider following us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, or your platform of choice. Have a comment or question? We welcome listener feedback and invite you to send us an email at communications@iasb.com. Thank you.